Bryan Kohberger didn't have any friends. Bryan Kohberger seemingly didn't have any close friends from Pennsylvania, where he grew up. When he moved to Washington, it didn't seem like he made any friends there either. Based on some of the documentaries that we've seen with some interviews, Bryan Kohberger may have tried to make friends with some people. Not quite sure if he really was pursuing a friendship or he just wanted to use them as test subjects and just observe them. Deep down inside, I believe that people generally want to have a social circle. They want to have friends that they can rely on, someone that's close that they can talk to. But with Bryan Kohberger, we don't really know because he just might be a one-off type of person. Bryan Kohberger was a type of person that seemed to have been really awkward. Now, there's nothing wrong with being awkward because I can be awkward sometimes too. I'm sure you can as well. But Bryan Kohberger was a type of awkward that was probably the worst type of awkward, where you're like socially awkward coupled with being really off-putting. It seemed like people would have conversations with Bryan Kohberger and Bryan Kohberger would lack the social cues. And when you have a conversation with someone and they're not picking up some certain things in a conversation, that type of conversation can be very dreadful very quickly, to the point where it seems like it's a one-sided conversation. You're kind of sitting there, you're nodding off, you're trying to be polite, you don't know how you're going to exit out of here, and the other person just goes on in a very one-sided conversation, and you're generally trying to show that you're not interested, or possibly maybe try to pivot and talk about other topics. However, they keep bringing back to the topic that they are interested in. Now, it could be something that he's just not aware of, or he just doesn't care, or maybe just both. This same sentiment was also expressed by some of the experts that actually assessed Bryan Kohberger prepping the defense for the trial. Bryan Kohberger has neighbors that decided to talk to the police because they were like, well, maybe there's something that I know that I can give to the law enforcement, maybe it can help them out a little bit. The neighbor describes Bryan Kohberger as quiet, and they actually got to meet Bryan Kohberger and his dad when Bryan Kohberger was moving in, I think it was during June of 2022 of that year, moving in the same apartment building. They also mentioned that it seemed like Bryan Kohberger was diametrically opposite of his father. The neighbors said that his father was very talkative during that time and that Bryan Kohberger just seemed like a very quiet person. Now, they mentioned the condition of Bryan Kohberger's car, how the vehicle was always very clean, very neat, and even on days that were rainy. I mean, we did know that he had OCD based on some other assessments that were done on him. And it might be kind of weird why a neighbor would make an observation like this. It's because Bryan Kohberger's vehicle was parked right outside of their apartment building. So they can see when Bryan Kohberger came in and went, and yes, even on the nights where he would come back from the late 1 to 2 a.m., maybe stargazing days, but they would also talk about what Bryan Kohberger was wearing on those nights. Dark clothing. Did he typically wear dark clothing, or was he trying to conceal himself, hoping that if he was going out looking for his potential victims that he wouldn't be spotted? Maybe Bryan Kohberger, maybe he did make some friends. The neighbor was asked whether or not she remembers seeing Bryan Kohberger ever with anyone. This is what they told law enforcement. They did remember a time when they returned home one day and they said they saw Bryan Kohberger sitting on the stairs leading up to his apartment, sitting next to some guy. The couple described the male as having light brown skin, a sleeve tattoo on his left arm, and wearing a sleeveless shirt and shorts. Now, apparently the husband said that the male was riding a really dark color Harley type of motorcycle, either blue or maybe like black in color, and that the motorcycle was not a sport bike, but it was very, very loud. Oof, hate that. Now, apparently Bryan Kohberger did acknowledge them and he asked them how it was going. It seemed as if Bryan, though, was acting kind of weird because he was being overly nice. The couple said that when they were walking away to their apartment, it seemed like Bryan Kohberger and the male, they were continuing to stay silent, as if maybe their conversation was something secretive or something they didn't want someone else to hear, and that they continued to stay silent and did not continue the rest of their conversation, at least when the couple was still around. Now, at some point, the male did get up and they heard the motorcycle start up, but did not see him drive off. The couple report that this is the only time they saw Bryan Kohberger with this person, and they never saw this person ever again, or saw or heard the motorcycle. So, could be someone that Bryan Kohberger was maybe friends with or acquaintance with, or honestly, what if Bryan Kohberger saw this person was just like, hey, this could be another test subject for me to study? Bryan Kohberger just seems like the type of person to me that would just not really treat people as normal people, but treat them as someone that he's like, oh, well, this is an opportunity for me to learn about something. And I only see people as, like I said, test subjects. That's just the kind of vibe that Bryan Kohberger gives me. The neighbor also mentioned that on a separate occasion, they remember seeing Bryan Kohberger coming home really late at night at like 1 a.m. in the morning. And Bryan Kohberger was wearing really dark clothing, had a dark colored backpack. And when the neighbor decided to say hi to Bryan Kohberger, it seemed like Bryan Kohberger was giving off the vibes that he didn't want to talk to them because he seemed very short with them instead of being his usual, I guess, polite self. Now, they don't remember when this day occurred. However, they are confident that this wasn't during the night of the murders. Jumping over to the night of the murders, the neighbors didn't have anything significant to report about Bryan Kohberger. They believe that maybe they went to sleep early that night and that they don't remember seeing Bryan Kohberger's car pulling in, if they remember seeing headlights coming in or not, or if they knew Bryan Kohberger was home during that time. Around the same time that Bryan Kohberger moves into Washington into his apartment, he also posts a survey on Reddit. This is around June 3rd to June 22nd of 2022. He posts in the prisons, the felons, the prison talk, prisons, and ex-con subreddits, hoping to try to get people to participate in his research that he's doing. Now, we're all pretty familiar with this Reddit post, but we're going to read it again for you guys who don't know about it. This is what Bryan Kohberger writes. Hello, my name is Bryan. I'm inviting you to participate in a research project that seeks to understand how emotions and psychological traits influences decision-making when committing a crime. I wonder if this was just his own personal research for his own personal curiosity. In particular, this study seeks to understand the story behind your most recent criminal offense with an emphasis on your thoughts and feelings throughout your experience. In the event that your most recent offense was not one that led to a conviction, you may still participate. Additional surveys are included after the open-ended section as to best understand your unique traits. The study should take about 30 minutes to complete fully. If you have any questions about the research, you may contact the research team via email. Student investigator Bryan Kohberger. Maybe he was having criminal thoughts in his mind and he wanted to compare himself to actual criminals who committed crimes in the past. Maybe he wanted to find other people to relate to. Fall season is when Bryan Kohberger is supposed to start his first semester at Washington State University, where he's getting his PhD in criminology. Now, during this time, he was also a teaching assistant as well. Man, imagine having Bryan Kohberger as your teaching assistant. I would like to hear from the students. It was also during the fall time that Bryan Kohberger actually applies to Pullman Police Department for an internship that they were offering. I remember seeing a court document where I think the law enforcement mentioned that they were the one that interviewed Bryan Kohberger. However, they found Bryan Kohberger to be someone that wouldn't seem like the type of person that people could trust. And being in the role of that internship, you got to trust people. You got to make sure that people trust you. Otherwise, it ain't going to work out. So Bryan Kohberger, he didn't get the internship. Could you imagine what type of resources he could have had access to? Now, this is my opinion, but I think Bryan Kohberger was maybe like your typical, the serial killers that always wants to be involved with law enforcement. They have a fascination with them. They try to be involved in investigations, whatever it is. I do wonder whether or not Bryan Kohberger purposely got pulled over so that he could interact with the local law enforcement. I don't know. Or maybe he generally was just getting pulled over because of his driving. On his road trip with his father, he also gets pulled over twice. And for one of them was within 9 minutes of each other. It was almost as if he was toying with law enforcement, like saying, hey, you guys are looking for the killers. Well, here I am, but you don't know that I'm the one that did it. But anyways, going to the timeline before the murders happened, Bryan Kohberger does get pulled over twice. One was in August 21st, 2022. Here's the body cam that came out. Actually, it came out today.
Hey there. I stopped you going a little fast. You realize this is 35?
Oh, it's 35?
It is, yeah. So you're going...
41?
Yeah, 43 was what the radar said.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
The other one was about a month before the murders happened in October 14th.
Think you know why I stopped you? You ran the red light.
What actually happened was I was stuck in the middle of the intersection.
Yeah,
so I
was behind you the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So technically you're not supposed to enter the intersection at all for that reason, because if the light turns red, then you're stuck in the intersection, and then you run the red light. So
not only that, he's also using this time to be really inquisitive about things that he can just Google up.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just have a question about that. So in terms of like, when you get a speeding ticket, that's obviously reported to your insurance. Is that the same thing with the seatbelt?
I don't think so. I think it's only moving violations that go to insurance, or things that might put points on your license.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Could I get a phone number from you?
Yeah, why?
We need to put it on the citation as it goes to the court.
So would you explain that to me a little bit further? So in Pennsylvania, when you're stuck like in the intersection, you have to make the left. So what would the appropriate thing for me to have done? Just
You're
back up
not
in
supposed
that
to
situation?
block an intersection like that in Washington. So just by you blocking the intersection, that's technically a ticketable violation, and then you're running a red light, so it's another ticketable offense. So you're not supposed to proceed into the intersection until you can go, because a lot of people do what you just did, right? Is like you're sitting in the intersection waiting, and then turns.
We actually don't have like crosswalks.
Oh,
so even if you're kind of slightly, there's a little bit more leeway as well. Like there are a few lines. Like there's one white line and there's another one. Like there's like a certain margin from which you can actually kind of put your vehicle, place your vehicle.
Yeah. So I know laws vary state to state, but there is a law in Washington for blocking an intersection like that, proceeding through when you don't. When you're just stalling. I forget the actual verbiage. I can find it for you, but it's like stalling, blocking an intersection.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the law. I don't mean to.
Oh no, yeah, I can find it for you. Yeah. One second.
To me, it seems like Bryan Kohberger really enjoys being on law enforcement's good side. Now, with the first body cam video, where he was like, oh, I'm an honest person, right?
Were you wearing your seatbelt when I stopped you? No. That's no good.
Right. Just being honest with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You guys are. There's absolutely no point in not being honest.
Yeah.
You have a radar.
Yeah. Okay.
Just for future reference, I'm obviously an honest person, right? I told you I wasn't wearing my safety belt. When people lie to you about that, say I lied to you about that, right? Just for my own knowledge. Do you honestly go back and look at that, or do you just...
With a seatbelt like this, I didn't check as I was coming up, so that's why I asked you.
Do you usually?
I should. I noticed you weren't wearing it, and I'm on this emphasis, and like I said, I'm getting paid by ICD, and they want us to enforce the seatbelt law, so.
In Pennsylvania, where you go to find laws, but in Washington, it's called the Revised Code of Washington. So I'll try to turn my brightness up, but it's just called an RCW, so it's RCW 46.61.202, so it's no driver shall enter an intersection unless there is significant space on the other side of the intersection. To accommodate the vehicle he is operating without obstructing the passage of other vehicles, despite any traffic control signal indications to proceed. So you had a green light. Yeah,
I do apologize if I was asking you too many questions about the law. I wasn't trying to No,
not at all. Like, I understand you're not from here, so if you don't, a lot of people don't know a bunch of laws. Like, I only know it because this is what I do, but
On paper, academically, Bryan Kohberger probably looks stellar. He had good grades. He got his undergrad degree. He was pursuing a PhD in criminology, and it seemed like he had a 4.0 in, I think, when he was at DeSales University as well. He was also a teaching assistant at WSU. Not only that, they were also funding his PhD program. However, Bryan Kohberger will lose all of that pretty fucking quickly. Moscow PD got so many documents from WSU in regards to Bryan Kohberger. However, a lot of the documents we didn't get, but we get to see little tiny previews of what documents they did get and some of the communications in it. It seemed like Bryan Kohberger may have offended some female students, and that possibly could have led to his termination. It seemed like Bryan Kohberger may have offended some female students. I wonder if he was trying to hit on them or if he was being awkward. Bryan Kohberger also had an altercation of some sort with a professor, and then he was put on some sort of like probation thing where they had to make sure that, they were going to possibly rehabilitate this guy. And when he was supposed to have his follow-up, I think days after that, he had another altercation with a professor. I don't know if it's the same professor or a different professor, but hey, maybe one day when we get all the documents, maybe we'll find out, or we'll see. Maybe someone will speak out in the future. Let's see what type of documents they got from WSU. Records of Kohberger's teaching assistantship termination. Yep, he got fired. Parking records, housing records. We have 4 correspondence between Kohberger and a professor. Another correspondence between Kohberger and a different professor. I wonder if any of these professors are the ones that he had an altercation with. There's also installment 5 containing Kohberger's Cougar Health records. Kohberger's application for the WSU PD internship. There are student schedules for Kohberger and chat logs from Microsoft Teams. I would love to see those chat logs. I wonder how he is in writing. I mean, I guess we already know he's very formal and I guess awkward in writing as well. Several grading rubrics and written assignments completed by Kohberger during his time at WSU. There was one that the court documents, there was one that the state found pertinent to the trial, and it was when Kohberger was talking about how he would process a crime scene. We went through some of that one. Screenshots of text conversation between professors referencing Kohberger, as well as meeting minutes from a meeting between Kohberger and someone named W on August 19. One of the screenshots shows a conversation between someone titled M in a text window and an unknown person. The first message from M reads, "Do you want to take Kohberger? He listed you and A as people he was interested in working with." The other person replied, "If I must, ... Another screenshot of a message thread from M on September 14 reads, "A tells me we need to do intervention with Kohberger. She's going to try to gather information, but apparently he's offended several of our female students. Assuming we get some details, how do you want to handle this?" It's crazy because this was reported in the grapevine, and I wasn't sure if it was just rumors that were circulating that was unfounded, but it seems like the rumors are true. "Assuming we get some details, how do you want to handle this?" The reply reads, "Let's see when we have more information." There's also some text thread screenshots, the meeting notes, and a self-evaluation completed by Bryan Kohberger in the files. I wonder how he graded himself. Probably very highly. I could definitely see that. More files containing scanned pages of email correspondence, class assignments, mentor assignments, and other miscellaneous documents. There's also several emails in the files which discuss Kohberger's specific issues, which led him to being terminated. I'm so nosy, I want to know why. From the TA program and losing his funding for his PhD program. It's crazy because we're going to go over Bryan Kohberger's interview in Pennsylvania. He tells them that he has a teaching assistant job and that he was planning on going back for the next semester. Fucking crazy. You're fired. Maybe he's delusional. There's also documents from Kohberger's courses, his teaching assessment documents, text messages, and email chains. We've also got, this is when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, and they're probably like, oof. So he's arrested. What do we do now? There's a risk assessment file which contains several pages of results of the WSU's risk assessment of Kohberger after his arrest. There's also some email correspondence between people after Bryan Kohberger was arrested. Yeah, they're probably like, guys, that's him. We employed him. What do we do with him? There's also a file containing several subfolders of emails between someone named P and Kohberger. There's also numerous pages of graded assignments at Kohberger's, as well as redacted text messages referencing Kohberger. I want to know all the text messages and emails of people talking about Bryan Kohberger. I want to know what they're saying. There's also several essays written by Kohberger, self-evaluation done by Bryan Kohberger, and additional miscellaneous documents. We also have a writing sample written by Bryan Kohberger, various email correspondence, and Teams notes. I think this is the last one. My neighbor's dog is going off again. Numerous assignments submitted by Bryan Kohberger, as well as correspondence between he and students in the course. We're going to hear from a coworker of Bryan Kohberger. Apparently, they shared the same office when they were both teaching assistants, and they did not have very nice things to say about Bryan Kohberger. They called Bryan Kohberger selfish. They said that Bryan Kohberger, you know how like Bryan Kohberger has been touted as someone who's like really smart, intelligent, whatever it is. But this person says that like, no, Bryan Kohberger would be lazy. Bryan Kohberger would push off some of his duties to this person, and that Bryan Kohberger wasn't really a good person to work with at all. I have to read you guys the document verbatim. On Tuesday, October 10, 2023, I met with WSU student KC, or it could be an O. Here she referred to as L in reference to this case. I was accompanied by FBI Agent Hill for this interview, as well as the FBI interpreter who was present via phone call, as L is from Redacted. So maybe there is maybe like a language barrier possibly. L was interviewed once previously by FBI agent, I cannot pronounce that. Zahag, I can't pronounce that. Zahagzuski. All right, I'm totally going to butcher this. I'm so sorry, Federal Agent Zahagzuski. In December of 2022, L was a former teaching assistant with Kohberger and shared an office with him for the fall semester of 2022 at WSU. I began asking L to tell me how he met Kohberger. L stated that they were both TAs for the criminology program at WSU. They shared an office together in Wilson Short Hall. L considered, Kohberger a friend and stated that he thought Kohberger was very intelligent, but also very selfish. L said Kohberger would often mislead him when it came to their shared work and would have L complete work meant for Kohberger. Sneaky. What a little shit. L said Kohberger came to his dorm room on one occasion around the time of the homicide. However, L was unsure of the exact date. Now, after L asked him for a ride to class, L also added Kohberger began to talk much more than usual after the homicides. L characterized Kohberger's conversations as those coming from someone who wanted to vent. I wonder what he was venting about. Or I wonder if he felt like after he committed the murders, that thumbs up he gave in that fucking selfie, if he felt like re-energized, if he felt like a new, totally different person. L stated Kohberger attempted to use his authority as a TA to inappropriately interact with female students. Yikes. L stated he thought Kohberger wanted a girlfriend and added they talked about Kohberger wanting a girlfriend on many occasions. Man, I hate creeps like this, where they try to take advantage of the situation in order to trap people in. One of the worst things is if you're working somewhere and then some creep hits on you. Now, there's nothing wrong with, someone approaching you and asking you for your number or things like that. But it's when they're actively creeping on you and they won't stop, even though you said no many times. They know that you have nowhere else to go because you were working that fucking shift right there. L said Kohberger told him he might lose his TA position over an issue with Dr. S. Kohberger asked L to help fight the allegations, but L stated he refused to help Kohberger. Yeah, you wouldn't want to be involved in that shit either. L characterized Kohberger as a dishonest person. To support this, L stated he spoke to Kohberger in late December of 2022. Kohberger said he was packing his bags to catch a flight back to Pennsylvania. Why would he say this? L later learned that Kohberger had been back in Pennsylvania for some time and drove back with his father. L then told us about some injuries he witnessed on Kohberger's face and his hands. L, however, was unsure of the date, but he said he thought he noticed injuries on two separate occasions in October and November 2022. L stated one injury was a large scratch on Kohberger's face, which L observed as looking like a scratch from fingernails. In the selfie that Bryan Kohberger takes, we didn't see any scratches on his face. Did you guys see any scratches? Any micro scratches? I didn't see any scratches at all. L said that he also saw wounds to Kohberger's knuckles on two separate occasions. When L asked Kohberger about what happened to him, Kohberger replied he had been in a car accident. His car seemed to be fine, right? L also stated Kohberger was frequently 20 minutes late to their classes. Was Bryan Kohberger really the good student that he was purporting to be? I mean, it seemed like he did have the grades, but maybe everything else, work ethic was just not there. I asked L what he and Kohberger would talk about. L said Kohberger liked to discuss his area of study, which was criminal decision making. Yeah, he was really into that, wasn't he? And burglary type of crimes. What was he convicted of again? Now, while going through these documents, we do learn that Bryan Kohberger did have friends at some point. This dates all the way back to high school. Now, apparently, we don't really get information about, the relationship in high school, but someone saw Bryan Kohberger and they were like, hey, maybe you should reach out and give them any information that law enforcement might find helpful or useful. So we don't know what was actually said, but we do learn that Bryan Kohberger did have friends in high school. Now we're going to jump over to the timeline of Bryan Kohberger finally getting arrested. Was it 47 days after the murders happened? Bryan Kohberger gets arrested, and I remember seeing in a court document somewhere where when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, he was put in the back of the law enforcement's car Bryan Kohberger's like, hey, like after this whole thing is over, like, do you want to grab a cup of coffee sometimes? Probably with that intense fucking creepy stare. Here's a jump scare for you guys. So Bryan Kohberger gets arrested, and the detective that was investigating this case comes all the way from Moscow, Idaho, into Pennsylvania so he can question Bryan Kohberger himself. There's a lot in this interview, so instead of summarizing it for you, I am just going to read it to you guys verbatim. Now, we don't really get into the details of the crime, unlike some other interviews that we've seen in the past, but with Bryan Kohberger, I guess we get a little bit of insight of maybe his interests and his beliefs, I guess, but we're going to read it verbatim. If the body cam footage ever comes out, if we ever get transcripts from the interview, or if we actually get audio video, which would be the holy grail of the interviews, you can bet that I'm definitely going to be watching them with you guys. I'm curious if we're going to have the same interpretations of Bryan Kohberger at the very end of the interview. All right, let's jump onto it. Bryan Kohberger was arrested 47 days after the murders were committed. He was arrested all the way in Pennsylvania. And for those of you guys who aren't following this case, he did a road trip with his father cross country all the way from Washington all the way to Pennsylvania. And you know, most people would just be like, oh, why wouldn't you just fly there? I don't know. Why wouldn't you just fly there? Why wouldn't you want to leave your vehicle that you used to commit the crimes in Washington? Oh, that's probably why. Bryan Kohberger was supposed to come back for another semester, so it wasn't like he was leaving, getting the hell out of Washington, but he was planning on coming back. Isn't that really time consuming and costly to drive the car back and forth? But anyways, he was arrested in Pennsylvania at his parents' home in a gated community. He was arrested wearing dark clothing. He had like a hoodie on or some sort. He was also wearing gloves as well. Now, law enforcement initially, when they were doing their search warrant, they're supposed to do one of those like knock warrants and basically announce to them that, hey, we're knocking and y'all need to get ready because we about to come on in. However, instead of doing that, they just busted in because they can see him through the window, I think, where he was discarding trash. And under those circumstances, law enforcement was like, well, I think we need to get in there ASAP because it looks like he might be tampering with possible potential evidence. So he was arrested wearing gloves. And I bet the detectives that were working on this case for the past 40 plus days, they were probably thrilled to come all the way to Pennsylvania to see the guy in person, arrest them, and finally get to interrogate him. After coordinating several meetings, law enforcement went to Pennsylvania State Police Barracks at Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, where they were waiting for the arrival of Bryan Kohberger so they could begin his interrogation. Around 2 a.m., December 30th, 2022, Kohberger was brought to Pennsylvania State Police Stroudsburg Barracks and placed in an interview room. The interviews were recorded. There was a built-in system that they had at the police station. And then additionally, I like Detective Gilbertson already. He had a pocket recorder, you know, because I just feel like some people just want to make sure they have everything recorded, they're organized, and they're ready to just get their game on. Here's a summary of what happened in the interview with Bryan Kohberger. It says a full transcript be attached to this case file. Give us a transcript. I want the transcript. Detective Gilbertson and Brett Payne began introducing themselves to Bryan Kohberger, stating which agencies they both represented. When Brett Payne introduced who he was, Kohberger said, "You do look familiar." Detective Gilbertson and Brett Payne prepared their note-taking materials, and Detective Gilbertson read Kohberger his Miranda rights. Now, at this point, Bryan Kohberger, he ain't got to say shit. He could just say, okay, well, that's it. I don't really care why I'm here. I'm not going to say anything at all. I want to talk to my attorney. But you know what? Bryan Kohberger, maybe he was trying to present as someone that's innocent, like, oh, I don't know why I'm arrested. Oh my God, you guys chased me all the way? You're from Idaho? You're chasing me all the way in Pennsylvania? I don't know why you're here. What are you talking about? I also think Bryan Kohberger likes to be involved in law enforcement any way he can. Because, you know, all those times that he got put over, it's as if he was trying to dangle a dead rat in front of a cat. I don't know. Maybe do cats even like dead rats? Maybe like live rats, but I don't know. But Bryan Kohberger, it seemed like he was just trying to toy with law enforcement. And I think this is also another opportunity for him to do the same thing. Mess with law enforcement. Talk to them some more. Get involved in somehow. See what information they have. See if they got anything on him or if they're just bluffing. Maybe they ain't got much. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he understood his rights, to which he replied he did. After collecting Bryan Kohberger's personal information and inquiring about any medications, Gilbertson and I, Brett Payne, began to speak to Kohberger. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger about the SWAT operation to his house, to which Kohberger replied he was concerned about his parents and his dog. Again, the dog thing coming up. I mean, parents make sense because you tend to care more about people that are close to you, people that are family. And then dogs, maybe similar to Murphy, maybe he really values the life of animals over the lives of students. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he was going to Washington State University, to which he replied he was. We made small talk with Kohberger about sports for some time. I can't imagine Kohberger being into sports. Kohberger stated he didn't follow WSU football much, but was a baseball fan. Was he really, or was he trying to relate to the detectives for being into sports? Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he had only been at WSU for one semester. Kohberger confirmed this and said he came to WSU with his father on July 1st. Kohberger then went on to say he was a first-year PhD student in criminal justice and criminology. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger what the process was to apply for a PhD. Kohberger stated he applied to 2 places. This is crazy to me, guys. UC Irvine. Okay, UC Irvine it's pretty close to me. UC Irvine. He could have been at UC Irvine. So he applied to 2 places, UC Irvine and WSU, which is where he eventually ended up going. Kohberger said he was going to graduate with his master's in criminal justice from DeSales and was inspired. Kohberger then asked if it was okay to engage in small talk like this. We were too, which we replied it was. After briefly mentioning he was strengthened by the fact that his father and mother were okay, Kohberger said he applied to 2 aforementioned schools because they did not require the GRE exam. Kohberger then spoke about the GRE for a brief time and then said he was accepted by WSU. Now, Bryan Kohberger, it's kind of interesting. I wonder if he's pretending to care about his parents or if he generally does care for his parents. But imagine what you've done to your parents' lives now. Yes, sentencing has already happened. Yes, at some point people are going to forget about Bryan Kohberger, but look at the damage that this has done to his family. His mom and his sister were at his sentencing. His father wasn't there. I didn't see any other family members. And I think he also has another sister as well, who was not present. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger what led him down the road of becoming a professor. Oh, also, I just want to say this too. Even though the family members had nothing to do with this, people were giving so much hate to the sister because Bryan Kohberger's sister, when there's a picture of her being photographed coming out of the courtroom, she looks like Bryan Kohberger. I mean, you're fucking siblings. Of course you're gonna look alike. But so many people were trashing on the sister, and people like Bryan Kohberger, I mean, I could totally see why that coworker is called Bryan Kohberger selfish. You don't care about other people. You don't think about your loved ones. You only care about yourself, your own selfishness. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger what led him down the road of becoming a murderer. Just kidding, they didn't say that. Of becoming a professor. Kohberger said it was because he loved being in college. Maybe he just wanted to creep on people. And stated knowledge was far more important to him than money. Okay. Kohberger added WSU had a good program to study under, and then said, you guys know all about this more than likely. Kohberger then asked questions about University of Idaho and other Idaho universities before stating he didn't know much about Idaho or Washington and had not left the tri-state area much. Kohberger then returned to speaking about his focus on learning and how he thought he could obtain his doctorate degree. Kohberger then said he recently returned home to see his family. I don't know if he was really planning on coming back because apparently when they did the warrant on the search warrant on his apartment in Washington, it looked like whoever was living there didn't have any intentions on coming back ever because of all the stuff they took with them. It's possible that maybe Bryan Kohberger didn't own much. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger about his time at DeSales University. Kohberger spoke for some time about his time at Northampton Community College and DeSales. Kohberger then spoke about how he became interested in criminal justice and stated he thought about being a police officer, but did not want to make that commitment unless he was absolutely sure. Kohberger then continued to speak about his education and universities. Kohberger also spoke more about the process to get into the PhD program and how competitive it can be. Wow, Kohberger, you're so smart. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger about his move to Washington. Kohberger said he drove across country and wanted the challenge of driving across country and experiencing it with his father. Kohberger then said he took a different route back home with his father for Christmas break to avoid the snow. I wonder if he was discarding the murder weapon somewhere along the cross-country drive. Kohberger spoke about his travels and the risk of travels in winter. Kohberger then began to speak of the beauty of the environment and its relationship to God and a higher power. This is the part that really surprised me because I don't know, I wasn't really sure if Kohberger was the type of person who really was a religious type. We spoke about this for some time, and Kohberger said he was raised Christian, but always was a skeptic except when confronted with the beauty of the natural world. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he had ever been to Pacific Northwest prior to coming to WSU. Kohberger said he had not. I asked Kohberger if he and his father made any stops along the way back to Pennsylvania. Told me they visited Colorado, but the main goal was to just drive. Kohberger then told a story about seeing an unmarked police car near Kansas City speed up behind him, catch up to another vehicle, turn on its emergency lights, and then drive away. Kohberger thought this was strange and unsure why it occurred. He probably remembered that because he probably thought, oh wow, it's law enforcement. Are they finally after me? Are they finally going to get me? When he was driving, that was probably on his mind the entire time. When is law enforcement going to finally catch me? Or maybe, he thought he was too smart to ever be caught. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger about the job he mentioned. Oh, this is interesting. Kohberger stated he was a teaching assistant. Kohberger then talked about how busy he was and how the funding package that comes along the way with being a teaching assistant is what makes the extra work worth it. Yeah, but you got fired and your funding got pulled. Kohberger then discussed ongoing projects with WSU PD and Pullman PD. Kohberger spoke more about being a TA is essentially assisting the professors and the department. So what hasn't been mentioned so far, maybe the law enforcement didn't include in their summary, but if you were detained, if law enforcement busted into your parents' house and the agency was all the way from Idaho, your first question is, why am I here? What am I doing here? Not the small talk bullshit. And it's 2 a.m. too. You'd be tired as well. You'd be like, I want to go home. Why am I here? So it's possible that maybe Kohberger did ask, but because it's not mentioned in this narrative, I'm assuming Kohberger just started talking about himself and making small talk. Kohberger stated he did not get to assist with teaching with the exception of assisting with office hours. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he would be a TA again next semester. Kohberger replied he would. Why would he say that? That's so crazy. At this point, like I said, he already got fired. He was fired a couple weeks before, and then not only that, they pulled the funding from his PhD program. Maybe reality wasn't hitting it to him. Maybe he's like, oh, I can just go back. They're not going to catch me. They ain't got nothing on me. I'm going to go back to WSU. I'm going to apply to another teaching assistant program. I don't know if there really is any because his major is in criminology. Kohberger then stated he understood why we were engaging in small talk, but would appreciate if we explained to him what he was doing there. Oh, now you want to know why you're there. Now you want to ask. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger why he thought we were there. Oh, put it back onto him. He said he wanted Detective Gilbertson to tell him. Detective Gilbertson said we were there because of what occurred in Moscow, but did not provide any further detail. Detective Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he watched the news. Kohberger said, I watched the news. Detective Gilbertson then asked Kohberger why he thought I looked familiar. Were you watching the news and keeping tabs on who the lead investigator was? Kohberger said he wasn't sure and stated I had a familiar face and looked like someone he used to know. I wonder if that's true. How many people do you really know, Bryan Kohberger? Detective Gilbertson then said we were there because of what happened in November just off the University of Idaho campus. Gilbertson asked Kohberger if he knew what that was, to which Kohberger replied, of course. When prompted to elaborate, Kohberger said it was the incident. Interesting, he calls it the incident. We've been investigating for, how long has it been? Just pretending like he doesn't know. Kohberger said there were probably several incidents and then said he was aware of a homicide because of a WSU alert he received. So he's trying to play dumb here. Detective Gilbertson asked when Kohberger received the alert. Kohberger said, he wasn't sure, but he thought it was sometime the previous month, maybe. Gilbertson confirmed that was why we were there, asked if Kohberger wanted to talk about that. Kohberger replied, well, I think I would need a lawyer. Kohberger then asked if we would explain to him what we were there for specifically and added he was tired. Gilbertson again stated we were investigating the homicides of the 4 students and that we had questions and things we hope Kohberger would help us understand. Kohberger sits back and said he had the utmost respect for law enforcement, but stated it was a constitutional right to speak to an attorney. Gilbertson affirmed this. Kohberger then re-engaged and said the only thing he heard of from Moscow was an alert that came to his phone. Kohberger then said he wanted to talk to an attorney. Gilbertson said we would stop now because Kohberger wanted to speak to an attorney. Kohberger then asked where his parents were and where his dog was. Kohberger re-engaged again and asked what questions we would have for him. However, Gilbertson then asked Kohberger again if he understood his rights and asked specifically what Kohberger wished. Kohberger asked what specifically we wanted to talk to him about and the reason. I told Kohberger he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and we're not going to ask him any further questions. However, Kohberger asked again for the reason he was there, but added he would like to talk to an attorney. At this point, we concluded our interview with Kohberger and left the room. I wonder if Bryan Kohberger thought that law enforcement was essentially going to be on their knees, begging, please tell me what happened. Please tell me what happened. It seemed like Kohberger wanted to continue talking. However, he was throwing the word attorney around because he knows that law enforcement can't engage any further. But I feel like Kohberger probably wanted to keep on talking, and maybe he was hoping that these law enforcement would bend the rules a little bit. It's a good thing they didn't. In these police documents, there's more about Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger's phone, computer, what they got it from his cell phone, and some of the activities or the strange activities as he was doing. For example, listening on police radio the night before the murders, taking screenshots of a hit and run accident that happened sort of around the area. We also get a little bit about Bryan Kohberger being in jail and what an inmate had to say about him. I want to get more information about Bryan Kohberger and being in jail. And there's always that lingering question, was Bryan Kohberger stalking them before? Or was this something that he just did on a whim, choosing 1122 King Roadhouse? Because Kaylee told a bunch of people that she felt like someone was watching her when she was outside taking Murphy out, and it seemed like there was someone hiding in the dark staring at them. And then I also want to go back to the victims as well, their backgrounds, their relationships, the whole rumors about the drug use thing, and the rumors about 1122 King Road being a party house, and dispelling some of the rumors, because I certainly heard a lot about those drug rumors from people that were kind of like on the fringe of this case, talking about how, oh, you know, the cartel's involved and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Well, we'll see where that pans out, I guess. And then there's other leads, other suspects that law enforcement was looking into. There was like the Uber driver, there was a guy at the grub truck, there was like people that was with the friend group, or the people that was at the frat. I want to also go through all the different types of leads that law enforcement was looking into. And then lastly, the false tips and just tips that came in general. There was, I'm really glad that people wanted to be involved in this case and be as helpful as much as they wanted to be. And there were some people that were coming and saying that like, hey, you know, I got a friend here that is kind of weird, kind of unhinged. Maybe you should look into them. So I can always appreciate people like that. But then there's people who are straight up just feeding law enforcement lies, saying they're like, oh, you know, I went to XYZ with Bryan Kohberger. Oh, I knew Bryan Kohberger, or I got like a Tinder matchup with Bryan Kohberger. So we're going to go through all those tips as well, because I think they're interesting, and my dog is moving my camera right now, so please bear with me. But guys, if you guys haven't seen the first episode of this series, we covered what law enforcement, it's not an earthquake, we covered what law enforcement documented at the crime scene. There's also additional information that we learned from what the roommates saw and heard that night that wasn't made public before. And then lastly, we find out more details about the victims and their injuries in terms of, I really do think that not only did Kaylee try to fight back, but I do think that Xana was also trying to fight back as well. And ultimately, going against a 6'1" guy in the dark while you're intoxicated, it's 4 a.m. in the morning, you're not ready, you're completely thrown off guard, you just had your food, you know, she had like an Uber Eats or a DoorDash order, and this guy's coming in equipped with a knife with an intention to kill you. So unfortunately, as much as she tries to fight back, she doesn't make it. And that's because Bryan Kohberger, he had this prep, he had this plan. He was a coward. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And if you guys enjoyed the series, keep an eye out for the other episodes. And other than that, I will see you guys in a few weeks for the live stream of Donna Adelson's trial. Yes, her trial is going to be happening, and we'll see if there's any delays. But from what I've heard so far, there has not been any. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye. Oh, also, we have a second channel where I put my vlogs on there. So check out Hey Corgi-san. I will try to do more vlogs, and instead of putting the vlogs on this channel, I decided to separate and put it on a second channel instead, so it's not like vlogs with true crime stuff. It's kind of weird. Yeah.